Special guest now, Arindam Guha, partner at Deloitte, is now with us, government and public services leader. Deloitte Touch is with us. Sir, thank you. Firstly, thank you so much for taking out time for us and giving us a chance to go through your special report. Just for our viewers, there has been a special report which has been released, which has three parts to it. So, Mr. Guha, let's start with the first part. Now, responses to the government in most large economies, has broadly resolved around giving financial aid to people, giving more stimulus to the economy, of course, providing special healthcare services to people, enhancing the healthcare services to people. Looking at that data, what's happened in India so far, what do you make of it so far?
No, I think, most large economies, including India, the response has been more or less similar. As you said very correctly, the Indian response is in line with the global response, three broad components. One is, of course, focusing on the medical and healthcare sector, because that's the front line of the battle against COVID-19. So in terms of that particular sector, in addition to direct funding, we are seeing clear attempts to go in for frugal innovation. We have seen a number of alcohol beverage manufacturers, for example, being nudged by the government to go into sanitizing liquid manufacturing. We have seen startups being encouraged to come up with testing kits and the approval processes being cut down. So it's essentially a story of mobilizing everything to take on the pandemic and manage it efficiently. On the healthcare side, of course, there's a clear need to segregate facilities, which is what the government has been doing. Of course, I think the private sector involvement, I'm sure we'll see more on that front shortly in terms of standard frameworks for public-private partnership, through which healthcare facilities and doctor bandwidth in the private sector will get leverage not only in the major cities, but even in the tier 2 cities. And the same thing would apply to testing facilities as well. So that's as far as the first pillar of the response is concerned.
Right. Just to take this first question ahead, what about MSME sector, the sort of problem they are facing, the labor migration issues? You think that is something which will need a lot of support, once we start to thrive or, respond to what has happened?
Definitely. I think the MSME sector has been a major focus for almost all countries, and India is no exception. We have already seen measures like the government bearing both the employers and employees' contribution to Employees Provident Fund for certain companies which employ less than 100 employees. We have seen those measures come into play. We have also seen, much of India's workforce is unorganized. And that's where we have seen direct cash benefit transfers through existing schemes. But coming back to your question on MSMEs, I think in addition to social security benefits being there, going forward, we do expect a number of other measures to come from government. What we have seen in other countries are specific lines of credit being extended through banks and financial institutions, with the target being MSMEs, so that they get better working capital loan support, and also postponement of their statutory payments, which India, by the way, has also announced in terms of postponement of certain tax-related payments. In some countries, they have their entire salary expenses for a period of 3 to 4 months. So we definitely expect more along those lines. The other important fact about MSMEs is, I think, credit guarantees area in addition to direct loans, which many countries have tweaked so that MSMEs can leverage enhanced guarantee facilities to borrow more.
Okay, all right. Mr. Guha, this is Mubina as well joining in. Hi there. while of course support to businesses, industries is of course important, but obviously the priority for the government has been health, right? I mean, without health you have literally nothing. So I want to talk to you now on the medical and healthcare emergency response. Of course, there's been this whole direct financing bid. There has been additional procurement of masks, N95 masks, ventilators, etc. Capacity as well, and available nurses and doctors. Do you think, for India, that could be a problem? And of course, how are we compared to maybe other countries? What sort of responses have governments across the world sort of given when it comes to procuring essential medical and healthcare resources to fight this pandemic?
I think we definitely, like, you see, there are two things which are happening. One is, of course, through the lockdown related measures, we are trying to flatten the curve, so that the stretch and the requirements, the push on the healthcare system, the healthcare infrastructure is minimized. But be that as it may, India still has a slight disadvantage in terms of number of doctors and healthcare population. So I think what we have seen in other countries, which I'm sure the government will explore it, if there is a requirement, many other countries, they have reached out to retired healthcare staff, including doctors, and requested them to join this war which we are waging against COVID-19. In the process, they have extended certain benefits to them, benefits like insurance coverage, etc. What we have already seen the government extend to the existing healthcare workforce, I am sure those benefits will need to be extended to them should they be called back to service. Secondly, of course, is leveraging the private sector bandwidth, which we are seeing happening. I think in most of the states today, in addition to public healthcare facilities, we also have select private healthcare facilities being prepared to accommodate COVID-19 patients, not only healthcare facilities, but even testing facilities. Of course, I think their standardized framework in terms of the role of government vis-a-vis private sector, they need to be set down. We have seen regular announcements by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. So I think we can expect more action on that front as well.
Okay, all right. Mr. Guha, I want to talk to you then about also a point that you mentioned with respect to direct cash transfers. You mentioned this in your first answer, and I suppose this would be extremely important, especially for the vulnerable beneficiaries. Do you think that DBT, of course, is the most efficient way to ensure cash infusion to the sector that will be coming out of this the hardest? And also, I think one path has been announced. One part of the social security schemes have been announced to benefit the most vulnerable sections of the society. Do you believe that we could be bracing ourselves for one more round?
Yeah, I think, this is just the initial response. India has a challenge because there are about 40 crore unorganized sector workers, and they have, they are not in any one central database. They are in the unorganized sector, so it's very difficult to reach out to them. So what the government has done is the next best course, which was available to them. They have gone by the existing schemes, like the Jan Dhan accounts. Many of the beneficiaries of Jan Dhan accounts are actually unorganized sector workers. Even when we look at the disbursements which have been announced to farmers or the farming sector, agricultural laborers under the Kisan Samman scheme, they also cater to another segment of the unorganized sector. So I think the government is trying to reach out with direct cash transfer benefits using existing channels, ensuring that there is no leakage and ensuring that the money reaches the hands of the target beneficiaries, many of whom are unorganized sector workers. Now that's the immediate response. I think going forward, we are likely, I think there could be other measures which may be required. For example, we have seen one of the measures being that the daily wage rate under the NREGA scheme has been enhanced, but the NREGA scheme as of now does not really cover agriculture sector laborers. And we can see that we are approaching harvest time. We will require significant agriculture sector labor to support the harvesting so that the food security does not get adversely impacted. Maybe it's time we need to look at measures like customizing NREGA and other schemes so that relevant support can be extended to that sector as well. So I think it's a beginning. This is a dynamic scenario. Going forward, I am sure we will also see a lot of unorganized sector requirement around the e-delivery of essential items, which is happening today, because there's a clear discouraging there's a clear strategy of discouraging people from going to grocery stores, etc. And I think maybe in certain areas of the country, home delivery, leveraging electronic channels for order booking, etc., are going to stay for some time. So that also is an avenue of employment for the unorganized sector, the workforce. And we need to just think of proper safety mechanisms which can be put in place so that without having a spread of the disease, you can also create employment options.
Right. So I would also just like to have a broader question for you. So when we look at what US has done, what select European countries have done, even some countries in Asia have done, they've really not cared about what's happening with the fiscal maths at this point of time and gone ahead and announced very big plans as to what they want to do. Here in India also, of course, we have seen measures coming in and substantially big measures as well. But right now, do you think that these are just emergency measures which have come into India? Mainly looking after the moratorium period, mainly looking after what's happening in terms of food supply, availability of cash to people, and more measures would come in. The points that you were making earlier about unorganized sectors, maybe even some of the other sectors which get hit quite hard.
Absolutely. This is a dynamic situation. And you are very correct when you say that, countries like UK, for example, have announced measures which are roughly around 15% of their GDP. US has gone in for a $2 trillion package, which is around 9 to 10% of their GDP. But I think the government of India is following a very prudent approach. This is an evolving situation. This is just the initial set of measures. Going forward, I'm sure we will see more interventions coming. If you recollect, if we look at the 2008-9 depression, there the support which the government actually ended up extending was around 6% of GDP. And as we stand today, we are at around 1% of GDP in terms of the measures which have been announced. But it's prudent not to go for everything in one go, because India has some inherent advantages and opportunities as well. We have a very large market internally. And while the global trade flows have been interrupted, this is also an opportunity for the country to replace some of those global sources with manufacturing in India. So I'm sure that's a holistic strategy the government is looking at, which is why it's prudent to take it one step at a time.
Thank you so much, sir, for taking out time for us. As and when you keep getting more findings, more suggestions, we would like to touch base with you once again on that front. So that was a very special view coming in from Deloitte regarding the findings as to what has happened so far, what can this pandemic do, various scenarios, and what essentially may be the need of R that one should track going ahead as well.